On a ship, range dies one deck at a time. Rook Halden felt that old truth under his boots the moment he stepped off the assault ladder and onto the seized cargo ship's upper deck. The steel had a slow animal tremor to it, deep and constant, running up through his soles and into the bad place behind his ribs. Salt wind dragged at his collar. Hard white ship lights washed the container lane until every shadow looked trimmed and placed. Nothing moved where something should have moved. But no lookout tucked high behind a stack. No scared crewman breaking cover. No bad shot from the dark. No panic. No shouted warning. Just open steel, open lane, and too much room for men who had supposedly fought their way aboard. A loose cargo strap lay across the lane, in a clean curve, too visible, too theatrical, as if somebody had wanted a man to notice it and still keep moving. Rook lifted 2 fingers near his chest, slowing the line without making a speech out of it. He hated speeches. They gave fear too much furniture. A seized ship should have sounded messy at the edges, full of dropped tools, locked throats, bad choices. This one waited like it had rehearsed. Bram Keene came up behind him with the rest of the boarding elements stacked low and tight in the wind. He was 34, built for forward motion, and good enough not to mistake caution for courage. The cutoff window was already shrinking. Once the ship crossed the maritime line on the plot, the outside options got thinner, uglier, and loud in all the wrong ways. Crew were still aboard. Command wanted movement before daylight made the deck a theater. Bram leaned close enough that his voice stayed under the wind. We move now. Rook kept his eyes on the container shadows. They were too neat. Even the loose tarp to starboard snapped once, then settled flat. As if the ship had swallowed the sound after allowing just enough of it. Nobody gives us this much room, he said, unless they already own the next one. It came out dry. Almost casual. Tamsin Vale heard the almost. She always did. Bram's eyes cut toward him. Not angry. Measuring the cost. That was the problem with competent men. They could be wrong and still have a point. The clock did not care which one of them was right. She slid into the lee of a container, clipped and calm, one hand checking the line behind her and her eyes checking him first. Former corpsman, former operator, current knife under the ribs of anyone pretending not to bleed. That joke got small, she said. Rook touched his thumb to his first finger, then the second. Counting exits he could see and the ones he did not trust. Forward lane. Port gap. Ladder well. Starboard shadow. Lower hatch. Too easy. Too open. A clean deck was a mouth with its teeth pulled back. Bram saw the hand count and did not like the time it cost. He was right about that. Delay was not free. And somewhere below, crew waited under another man's timing, and every second gave that man more room to arrange them. Rook knew that without knowing the whole shape, that was the part that bothered him. The absence had a hand behind it, but not a face yet. He could feel the team behind him wanting motion, not theory. He wanted the same thing. He just wanted it alive. His breath stayed even. His shoulder did not. He cut the team across the container lane at a slower angle than Bram wanted. Using the empty space, instead of trusting it. Boots whispered and clicked on steel. The ship's vibration deepened as they passed the first stack, and the hard lights made their shadows run ahead like careless men. No one fired. That made it worse. Rook wanted one stupid muzzle flash, one nervous mistake, anything human and early. The deck gave them nothing. Bram's jaw tightened, but he adjusted the movement instead of fighting him over it. Good commander. Annoying timing. Tamsin stayed half a pace off Rook's left shoulder, close enough to catch a stumble he would deny having moonlight. At the lower hatch, the air changed. Warm metal breathed up from the dark carrying oil, sweat, and a low knock that did not belong to the engine, toll-free. 3 beats, then another a signal or a body against steel. Rook stopped smiling. Bram raised one hand, and the line compressed behind him. From somewhere below, a voice cut off too fast. Then metal answered metal, low and deliberate, as if someone had tapped the ship from inside its throat. The upper deck stayed empty. The lower decks had begun to speak for whoever owned them. The first ladder down took the wind away and gave them heat in return. Rook moved into it with his shoulders narrower than they wanted to be. One hand brushing steel, boots finding each rung by feel more than trust. The sound changed by the third step. Picture. Above, the deck had been open and wrong. Below, every noise came bent. Muffled voices slid through the stairwell and lost their owners. The vibration thickened under the metal, deeper than the clean engine thrum. As if the ship had another pulse running through its bones. Bram Keene was right behind him, pressing the pace without crowding the descent. "Keep moving," Bram said, low and flat. He was not rushing for pride. Delay now meant crew could be moved, doors covered, routes bent. Rook hated that Bram was right. It made the fear less useful. The upper deck had been a held breath. This was the exhale, hot and dirty, coming up from a place where distance turned into corners. Rook kept his chin down and let the stairwell close above him without looking back. Looking back made ladders feel longer. It also told the man below what you feared, too. At the bottom, the first crew passage ran narrow and yellow under old lights. The air was warmer, wet with oil and breath. A voice sounded ahead, then another to the left. Too close together to be accident and too far apart to be panic. Rook stopped half a step before the passage opened. His thumb found his first finger again. Exit. Bend. Hatch. Blind angle. None of it sat still. The sound traveled wrong through steel, bouncing from places that did not match the space in front of him. Bram signaled the rear pair to close up. They tried. The passage tightened before their bodies did. A shape crossed at the far end, not firing, just present long enough to pull eyes. Holtmar, if the pre-board name had been worth anything, did not need a door to vanish. He needed men to believe a route was still theirs. A dull impact came from the left, metal on metal, placed like bait. One of Bram's men turned his head before he meant to. Holt answered that borrowed attention with another knock from the opposite side, not random, not loud. Just enough to make the passage feel as if it had grown a second mouth. Bram's shoulder tightened beside him, not in doubt, in calculation. Speed could still save the shape of the team if they paid for it now. Then the crew noise rose. Not shouting. Worse than shouting. Staggered voices, boot scuffs, a hard breath, a cough cut short at the wrong second. Sable Rin's kind of pressure, Rook thought, though he could not see the hand moving it. Crew sound laid over hostile timing until the passage seemed full of civilians. And empty of targets at the same time. The rear operator began to drift left without being told. Pulled by a voice that sounded close enough to need saving. Rook saw Bram catch it too. Bram made the call before hesitation could harden. Left element, move, right, hold and cover the lane. It kept the rear from stacking in a killing knot. It also split them. Good call. Bad result. The ship did not split the team. Somebody used people, sound, and steel to do it. Rook stepped into the first passage. As Tamsin Vale shoved a man forward by the strap at his shoulder and said, "Do not admire the problem. Move." Her voice had no room in it for comfort. Rook moved. His breath wanted to stay up near the ladder. His feet did not get a vote. A frightened crew made noise. Managed fear made rhythm. This had rhythm. It was ugly work, and professional, which made it worse for everyone. The formation broke cleanly enough to feel planned by someone else. 2 operators were pulled down the left bend with Bram, chasing crew noise that already felt too neat. The Rook took the right with Tamsin and 3 more, his clean tempo gone before he ever owned it. Warm air pressed at his face. The lower deck took his sightlines in pieces: pipe shadow, bulkhead, elbow of passage, another blind slice of steel. No long answer. No distance worth trusting. He heard Bram once, through the wall, clipped and close, then the sound folded under vibration. Rook lifted a hand. The team froze just short of the next bend. "That wasn't the ship," he said. "Somebody moved us." Tamsin's eyes flicked once to his breathing. She did not call it out. The deck vibrated harder under his boots. And for one short second the old lower space memory pressed its thumb against his throat. He swallowed it down and listened. Ahead, a crew passage opened under a flickering light. A man stepped into it too fast, too stiff, with both hands hidden and terror making his face look hostile. Speed would solve one problem and murder the wrong man, if Rook let the pressure choose for him. The man came out under the flickering light, with his hands hidden and his shoulders locked too high. Terror had pulled his face into something sharp and wrong. For half a second he looked like every bad answer Speed ever loved. The crew passage held him there, framed by yellow light and sweat-dark steel, while boot echo chased itself behind Rook and made the corridor sound fuller than it was. Rook felt the team behind him tighten. One breath. One mistake. That was all it would take. He saw the coveralls then, the oil across the sleeve, the way the man's boots landed heel-heavy. Not trained, not hunting, just driven hard out of some place he should never have left. Wrong route? Wrong rhythm. Wrong fear. A younger operator behind Rook shifted half an inch. And half an inch was a lot when a man's hands were hidden. And everyone's nerves had been trained into wire. Rook's hand came up flat. Hold, but the word hit the passage and died there. The crewman kept moving anyway, fast and blind, as if the command belonged to somebody else behind him. Behind the man, the lower deck breathed warm through seams in the steel floor, carrying the sour smell of oil and panic that had been arranged, not spilled. Tamsin Vale shifted beside Rook, close enough to move and smart enough not to crowd his line. The man stumbled past a pipe bracket, hands still buried against his body, and the younger operator sucked air through his teeth. Rook heard it and hated the sound. Fear trying to become permission. He stepped forward before the room could vote. The distance was too short for clean judgment and too long for mercy to arrive by itself. Warm oil stink filled his mouth. The crewman's breath came in broken pulls, too loud, too close. Rook saw a flash of white knuckle at the man's belly, not a weapon shape. Not enough to bet a life on from 6 feet, not enough to let him hit the team either. "Hands," Rook said. The man did not hear him, or heard another order louder. Somewhere deeper, a boot scraped once, placed with ugly care. The sound did not match panic. It waited for Rook to choose. And that was Sable's gift. If a thing that ugly deserved a name, she could make fear sound like responsibility. Rook closed the gap and took the collision with his shoulder instead of letting it break into the line. The crewman hit him hard, all bone and panic, and the impact drove Rook back half a step into hot steel. Pain sparked under his ribs. His damaged shoulder tried to close itself around the shock, and failed. The man's hidden hands came loose around a strip of torn cloth and a small metal tag. Nothing that should have killed him, nothing that should have saved him. He fought like a drowning man fights air. Rook trapped motion, not limb by limb, not clean, just weight, and wall, and breath, holding the man upright while keeping his own body between the crewman and the nervous trigger behind him. Tamsin slid in on the other side and caught the man's elbow before he folded. "Crew," she snapped. "Crew, damn it." The younger operator's muzzle dipped. The moment passed. Late, but alive. Rook smelled sweat, oil, and old paint. The crewman made a sound that was almost a word, and pointed with his chin toward the passage he had fled. Not toward safety, away from pressure. That mattered. He wore an engine room badge, but he had come from the wrong side of the passage, against the normal run of work and fear. No crewman chose that path under a seizure unless someone had turned the right one into punishment, sorrowed. "Crew doesn't move like that unless somebody taught them fear," Rook said. His voice stayed low. It cost effort. The crewman's eyes jumped past him, not to Rook, not to Tamsin, but to the bend where boot echo had gone quiet. That silence had edges. Rook let the man down against the wall, just long enough for Tamsin Moon to shove him behind the line and keep moving him without comfort. No lecture. No pause. The delay had already spent itself. From the left, Bram Keene's voice cracked through steel, cut thin by vibration, then disappeared under a hard metallic slam. Ahead, the passage changed. A shadow crossed the far light and withdrew. The route that had been open a breath ago now narrowed around a bulkhead corner. Bodies or steel or both, shifting into place by human timing. Rook knew then the crewman had not been the trap. He had been the hinge. Sable Rin had used fear like a door. And Rook had opened it the only way he could, without killing the wrong man. The cost came back fast. Lost seconds. Exposed position. A corridor that now knew exactly where he stood. Metal answered from both ends, low and deliberate. And the passage began to close around the team. With the patient confidence of men who knew the next corner already belonged to them. The passage did not slam shut. That would have been kinder and too simple. It narrowed by choices. A body moved at the far end and vanished. A pipe shadow shifted near the bend. A low impact came from behind, then another ahead. Each one placed just far enough apart to make the team hear two roots dying at once. Hot steel pressed against Rook's shoulder through his sleeve. The crewman Tamsin had shoved behind them, stumbled with the element. Sucking air through his teeth, one hand locked around that useless metal tag. Rook felt the line compress. Not collapse. Compress. There was a difference, and the difference meant a human hand was still working the space. Holtmar had cut the passage without needing it to close. He did it with placed sound, moving bodies, and the pressure of retreat becoming less believable by the second. Kravos showed himself in pieces ahead, a shoulder under bad light, a still head. One hand loose at his side. A shape that did not rush, because rushing would have given Rook something easy to read. The corridor took Rook's distance inch by inch, and made him feel every one of them leave. The open deck above already felt like a lie told to get them here. Move right. Bram Keene came through the wall, thin and broken by engine noise. Still command. Still useful. Rook shifted to answer the pressure, but the rifle line died against steel, bodies, heat, and angle, pteropod. He had metal at his left elbow, Tamsin at his right. A terrified crewman behind her, and hostile weight waiting in front, where the passage pinched. The weapon was still in his hands. That did not make it an answer. Clean distance needed air. This passage had none to give. Sweat ran under his collar, and cooled nowhere. The muffled engine beat flattened timing, until each step felt half late. Tamsin shoved the crewman forward another 2 feet, and kept a hand on his shoulder without slowing to make it gentle. Keep him moving. she said to the operator behind her. If he stops, we all stop. No one asked for more. No one had room for more. Rook saw the route then, not as a path, but as a squeeze. Oren Pike's people were not holding ground. They were taking away the shape of movement. That was colder than a block. A block could be solved. A squeeze had to be survived while it kept changing. Cray came in when the passage had made Rook's long answer useless. Not charging one. Worse. He stepped into the distance Rook wanted and made it shared. Holt's pressure from behind folded the team forward at the same time. A human shove passed through sound, fear, and blocked steel. Rook turned with it and caught the first collision on the rail and his own forearm. The rifle struck the wall hard enough to jolt his shoulder and tear the clean line out of his grip. Pain opened white under the joint. The sling bit. The muzzle dipped into a place where it could hurt the wrong person before it hurt the right one. And Rook shoved it down and in, making it dead weight instead of a mistake. Cray's breath was close. Rook smelled salt, sweat, and the flat oil stink of the passage. He gave ground because there was no room to take any, rolled his shoulder off the steel, and used the movement to keep his feet under him. Not pretty. Barely controlled, Cray's hand caught the loose strap across Rook's chest for half a breath and turned the rifle into drag. Rook broke the pressure with his body, and not a clean technique, just weight and ugly timing. Tamsin cursed once, short and dark, as the crewman stumbled and another operator caught him against the wall. The impact cost the whole line a step hard. One step was plenty down here. Rook came out of the contact with his shoulder burning and the rifle hanging wrong. Still, his train, less useful than it had been 10 seconds ago. The route behind had filled with noise. The route ahead had filled with intent. Bram's voice snapped again from somewhere left, closer now, driving his split element forward through their own pressure. Competent, still moving, still not saving Rook from this. Good. Rook hated needing that, and trusted it anyway. He looked at the wall, the bodies, the cut angles, like the way Cray had entered only after Holt made retreat costly. The thought landed cold, and he's not blocking us, Rook said. He pulled a breath through the heat and felt it scrape. He's shrinking us. Tamsin glanced at the rifle, then at his shoulder, and chose not to say the thing he already knew. The lower deck had taken the long line. Next it would take time, then room, then the lie that a sniper stayed dangerous at any distance. Ahead, Cray shifted closer under the muffled engine, close enough that the rifle was almost furniture. Holt's pressure answered from behind, lower now, bodies moving where Rook wanted empty space. The passage tightened again, and the enemy came in. Where Rook's old advantage had almost nowhere left to live, and no clean breath left to borrow. Cray took the last usable distance from him without hurry. That was the insult of it. Rook had seen men rush close before, all anger and noise, trying to turn courage into speed. Cray came in, like the corridor belonged to his breathing. Holt's pressure answered behind them, closing the team's rear by sound and body weight. While the steel walls held everyone upright and trapped, the lower deck air pressed hot against Rook's teeth. His rifle hung wrong across his chest, sling bitten into his shoulder, the line useless in the squeeze. Below the rifle, everything was close enough to cost him. Cray stepped in under the muffled engine beat. And Rook felt the old answer rise in him, the one that wanted space, angle, time. None of it fit. He let the weapon drop harder against the sling, instead of fighting for a clean position that was gone. Tamsin shoved the crewman and another limping operator past a pipe elbow, keeping them moving with one hand and a voice like cut wire. Ear forward. Don't make him win your feet, Rook almost smiled. Bad time for it. His ribs tightened before the smile could become anything useful. The first impact hit him across the shoulder line and drove him back into hot steel. Not a clean strike. Not clean anything. Weight, breath, blocked movement, the rail catching cloth, his bad shoulder flashing white and dull at the same time. Rook gave ground until there was no more ground to give, then stopped giving it. Cray crowded him, close enough that Rook could hear the man's breath split through his nose. Strong, patient, trained to live where rifles became expensive sticks. Rook kept his own hands low and ugly, doing less than instinct wanted. Too much motion down here made openings for the wrong man to die. He felt the rifle butt scrape steel and jam against his hip. Dead weight now. Worse than dead, it dragged his timing. He twisted enough to free his feet and paid for it in the ribs. Pain punched the breath out of him in a short, private sound. Cray heard it. Of course he did. The close ones always heard. Behind Rook, one of the operators stumbled under the crewman's weight. Tamsin swore once and kept both of them upright. No softness, no pause, just movement, bought with somebody else's pain. Rook stopped trying to win the contact like a clean problem. He let the passage choose its ugly shape and worked inside that instead. Steel at his back. Heat in his mouth. Cray's shoulder too close. Holt's pressure folding the rear again. Rook shifted his weight with the engine beat, not against it, and made Cray overfill the space he thought he owned. The move cost Rook the rifle. Not lost completely, not gone. But the sling snapped loose from its clean ride. And the weapon dropped hard enough to bang against the deck grating. It clattered once, loud in the tight place, and every head wanted to turn toward it. Rook did not. He took the opening with his body, not his pride. Shoulder into steel caught. Hip into pressure. A hard shove that became a fall, that became two men breaking apart without either of them looking graceful. Cray hit the wall and slid a half step still up, still dangerous. Rook caught himself on the pipe and felt something in his shoulder grind. He had gained 2 feet and lost the rhythm of his right side. A bad trade, except the only worse trade, was not making it. The route timer in his head, the one he hated trusting, went red. Too slow. Too loud. Bram's element was moving somewhere left, but not with them. The split had widened. Cray came back once more, not fully, not foolishly. Just enough to prove the last exchange had not made him a lesser problem. Rook met him halfway this time, because waiting had become another word for losing. The contact jarred his ribs and shook the rifle loose against his thigh, turning the weapon into a swinging piece of bad timing well. Rook trapped it against his own body before it could foul Tamsin's path or the crewman's legs. That cost him balance. Cray took the imbalance and put it into the wall. Rook saw the edge of the lower root over Cray's shoulder, saw Tamsin's wounded operator clearing it by inches, saw Bram's shadow flicker through another passage too far away. He drove his weight forward in the ugliest possible line and broke the tie. Cray fell back a step, still on his feet, but not between them and the downward access anymore. That was not victory. That was rent paid for one more doorway. Cray backed off only far enough to prove he did not need to run. Holt's pressure from behind faded, then returned at a different angle, sealing the path they had wanted and leaving the one nobody liked. Down. Rook pulled the rifle up by the broken hang of its sling and felt how wrong it sat now. Useful, maybe. Clean, no. His ribs would not fill all the way. His shoulder burned with every small correction. Tamsin got the wounded operator and the crewman past him, eyes on Rook for less than a second. Long enough to see the cost and not waste breath naming it. Bram came through the steel, voice harsh and close. "Halden, move! You're late!" Not accusation. Not yet. Worse. A fact. Rook took one breath too many before answering. That one breath changed Bram's silence on the other side of the wall. Trust did not break with speeches. It shifted by seconds. Rook forced his feet forward. The root behind them died under another human-made impact. Ahead, a lower access marker flickered in heat haze, half lost behind pipe shadow. 7th deck. The words sat there like a door he had been avoiding since before the ship. Tamsin saw him see it. Nobody had to say what came next. The fight had not cleared the way. It had spent the last good route and made the next one unavoidable. There was no rest below the rifle. There was only the next section of passage, lower and hotter. With the wounded moving badly and everyone pretending that counted as moving well enough, Rook kept the damaged rifle close against his chest. Where it pulled wrong on the sling and reminded his shoulder of every inch, his ribs would not open all the way. Each breath came in with a small catch, then left too fast. He made it 3 steps past the flickering lower access marker before the 4th step turned into a pause. Not a stop. He would have hated the word stop. Just a fraction of weight held back, a measurement no one wanted to admit mattered. The ship did not forgive fractions. Metal struck somewhere behind them, dull and placed, and the sound made the passage feel shorter. Tamsin had the wounded operator moving with one hand under his gear, and the crewman shoved ahead of him, still clutching that metal tag like it had promised him a country. She saw Rook's pause without looking, like she had been waiting for it. That was her gift, and her cruelty. Same package, usually. Bram's voice came through the wall again, broken by vibration. The status, not panic. Command pressure with teeth. Rook lifted his chin toward the heat-smudged access marker and made his mouth work before his lungs fully agreed. Still ugly, he said. So at least the ship's consistent. The joke came out thin. Smaller than he meant it. Smaller than he could afford. Tamsin turned her head just enough for him to see her eyes. Not soft. Never soft down here. Don't joke it's smaller, she said. Tell me if it slows you. The words landed harder than Cray's shoulder had, maybe because there was nowhere to put them. Rook kept walking. He made himself do that first. Feet before pride. Breath before answer. The lower air tasted of oil, old water, and hot insulation. Pain changed the timing of his right side. He had to plan around it now. Which meant Oren Pike's people had made his body part of the route. That was the cleanest, nastiest work of the night. He wanted to say no. He wanted to say nothing. Both were useless. It slows the first step, Rook said. It was not a confession. It was a range report with his name on it, English. Tamsin accepted it that way, which was why she was still alive, and why he hated needing her. Then don't give it the first step, she said. Give it the second. She shifted the wounded operator forward, before he sagged, turning his stumble into 2 bad paces instead of 1 full collapse. No treatment, no comfort, no saintly pause, no little lie about how fine he looked. Movement, imperfect, necessary, and mean. Rook followed, counting by pressure now. Left shoulder wrong. Right ribs short. Rifle drag. Crewman unstable. Rear pressure changing. Bram separated but close. Tamsin at his flank. The joke had cracked, and through the crack came the thing he had kept private too long for it to stay private tonight. Fear was no longer a room inside him. It was a delay other people could die inside. The thought stripped the last warmth from his humor. Good. He did not need humor clean. He needed it honest enough to shut up when timing mattered. They moved through a stretch where the corridor widened by less than a foot, and somehow felt more dangerous for it. Wider meant choices. Choices meant somebody could arrange them. Distant impacts kept traveling through the ship, each one landing from the wrong direction first, patient, close enough to count, and wrong. The crewman heard something Rook could not separate, and flinched toward a side run barely visible behind hanging cable. "No," Tamsin snapped, hauling him back by the collar before he could bolt. A woman's voice cut through the passage ahead, low and furious. "That is not their route." Mara Thorne stepped out from a service recess with soot on one sleeve, and a wrench mark dark across her palm, looking less rescued than offended. Rook brought the damaged rifle up enough to cover the space without trusting it. She looked past the weapon at the crewman, then at the passage behind him. "My engine room people don't run that way," she said. "Not unless somebody scared them off the right one." Rook felt the shape of it click into the pressure map. Not a solution. Worse. A pattern. Tamsin saw his breath catch and did not spare him. Bram's voice cracked through steel again, asking for movement. Rook looked toward the service run Mara had come from. Narrow, hot, and angled down. The route knowledge had arrived. Naturally, it pointed into more danger. Mara Thorne did not step aside like the service run belonged to the team. She stood in the mouth of it, soot on her sleeve, one hand braced against hot steel, and looked at the crewman as if he had personally offended the ship. The passage behind Rook kept breathing heat over his neck. His damaged rifle dragged at the wrong angle, and his shoulder answered every small correction with a white little flare, and his ribs kept making breath a negotiation. Mara pointed down the narrow service path without giving it the comfort of being called a way out. "My crew doesn't take that route unless somebody scares them off the right one." Her voice was flat, angry, ship practical. No lecture, no map, just a fact with teeth. Rook watched the crewman's eyes jump toward the service run and away again. Not confusion. Memory. For the engine rhythm below thumped through the deck in steady bars. And over it came footsteps from somewhere deeper, repeating where footsteps did not belong. Same spacing. Same wrong pause. Sable Rin's work had a pattern now. Not magic. Not command over bodies. Just fear moved on purpose, until it sounded like weather. The ugly part was how readable it became once somebody honest about the ship named what was wrong. Bram's voice broke through from the left, closer and harsher than before. "Halden, pick one. Useful command. Irritatingly fair." Rook looked past Mara into the service run. It dropped on a tight angle between cable trays and sweating pipe, with barely enough room for one hurt man to move badly and one angry woman to shove him when pride got slow. It was not safe. That made it more believable. Safe had been the enemy's favorite costume all night. Tamsin shifted the wounded operator forward, eyes on Rook's first step instead of his face. "You trust her?" she asked. Mara snorted. "He doesn't have to trust me. He has to trust what my people don't do." Rook liked that, which was inconvenient. He lifted the damaged rifle enough to make the service shadow respect him, not enough to pretend the line was clean. The repeated footsteps came again below, too even for panic, too human for machinery. Crew noise from the right. A metal rap from behind. A small cough, cut short ahead. Rook felt the shape click into place. The crew were being steered off the normal route, then echoed back through the wrong one to pull the team downward. Reading it did not free them. It only showed which mouth was open and how neatly it had been held open for him. Rook went first, because the choice was his once he let the pattern matter. The service run took him by inches. Heat collected under the low steel and slid down his collar. His palm touched the wall and came away slick with oil haze and old sweat. Behind him, Tamsin kept the wounded moving without blessing the effort. Mara followed close, muttering directions in hard little pieces. That named what crew normally felt rather than what the ship technically was, and they'd avoid that bend in a fire. They'd cut back here. Nobody goes down there unless the other way hurts. Rook turned those bits into weight and timing. Not a map. An argument with the ship's habits. Halfway down, the crewman stumbled toward a side notch at the exact moment repeated footsteps sounded below it. Rook caught the motion before the man finished choosing it, and he did not grab hard self. Hard made panic louder. He blocked with his body, felt his ribs flare, and shoved the group past the notch. Something moved in the dark beyond it. A shoulder, a hand, gone before it became a target. The root had not hidden danger. It had introduced them properly. Somewhere ahead, a low metal impact shut the sound behind them into a smaller room. And the air changed as if the ship had lowered its ceiling. The retreat died by human timing. Not a door. Not a failed system. Men moved behind them, quiet until they wanted to be heard. And the service run filled with the pressure of bodies taking away yesterday's options. Bram came through the wall again, breath chopped by movement. Left is closing, down is open. Rook almost laughed at the generosity of that word. Open necks. The service path angled steeper, and the lower air rose toward them, used and hot. Full of engine rhythm that made the damaged sling tap against his chest. Mara stared down into it and said nothing for once. That told him enough. Tamsin pushed the wounded operator ahead, then looked at Rook's feet. Not his face. His feet? The first step. He gave it before the fear could ask for paperwork. Metal vibration climbed through his soul and into the broken timing of his ribs. Behind them, Holt's pressure answered with two placed knocks, sealing the way back in a language the whole team understood. Ahead, a faded stencil showed through oil haze on the descending steel flate. 7th deck. The only route left pointed down, and Oren Pike's people had made sure it felt like a choice. Which was the cruelest kind of control. The 7th deck did not look like a place men entered. It looked like a place the ship used for heat, noise, and punishment, then forgot to make humane. Rook stepped down into it, with the damaged rifle pulling wrong, and the first breath already narrowed. The air was hotter here, thick with oil haze and used metal haut. The kind of heat that seemed to have passed through machinery before it reached the lungs. Engine vibration came up through the stair and the wall at the same time, swallowing small sounds and giving back only pressure. The service route closed above them with bodies, not steel. Human timing again. Rook heard Holt's placed impacts behind, and the hush of men making retreat expensive. Mara's earlier route knowledge had gotten them oriented. It had not saved them. Below engineering access ran in tight vertical slices. Pipe, rail, bulkhead, ladder, shadow. The ceiling sat low enough to make every shoulder adjustment feel like an argument. The deck was not just lower. It was stacked downward, every short ladder and half platform taking air away from men who needed it. Distance had become a bad memory. Tamsin pushed the wounded operator down after him and said, "Move with it, Rook. Don't explain it. No comfort in it." Good. Comfort would have been another thing to carry, and the deck already had enough weight waiting for him. Rook moved with it for 3 steps. On the 4th freode, the deck stole the shape of the passage. Sound compressed against the steel and made the engine feel close enough to touch. A boot scrape came from ahead, or below, or behind the pipe run to his right. He read it wrong. He knew it the instant he shifted his weight toward the false sound, and his bad ribs delayed the correction. Not much. A breath. Half a step. Enough. A shape crossed low through oil haze on the left and vanished into the engine shadow. Draven Kett, or one of Oren Pike's lower blockers, did not have to show himself cleanly. He only had to make Rook spend time on the wrong pressure. Bram's voice broke through from somewhere above left, clipped, and closer than it should have been. Windows narrowing. There it was. Cost. Named without mercy. Rook lifted the rifle, felt the sling drag, and found the line dead before it lived. Hot steel at his shoulder. Pipe in the way. Wounded behind. Tamsin watching his feet again. The old lower space response pressed in without asking permission. No image. No speech. Just his lungs deciding the air had turned rationed. And his body believing the lie before his mind could overrule it. Tamsin hit his shoulder with 2 fingers, not gentle. Not enough to worsen it, enough to put him back in the room. Second step, she said. Rook took it. Pain changed the timing, so he changed the timing around pain. Ugly math. Human math. He moved the line left by inches, taking a worse angle that protected the wounded, and gave Bram's split element a chance to rejoin pressure instead of chasing ghosts. The 7th deck punished every inch. Heat crawled under his collar. Oil haze made the light dull and sour. The engines swallowed command fragments until men looked late even when they obeyed. Mara pointed once through the murk, orientation only. A service rail that should have led toward engine space, not an answer, not a miracle. Rook trusted the direction and not the promise. Another sound struck behind them, and the route they had used tightened under human feet. The wounded operator slipped one knee against the grating, not falling, not staying upright either. And Tamsin had to spend both hands for one ugly second to keep him moving. That was the cost of Rook's misread, not shame, not memory. But a man losing height in a place where height was time. 5. Oren Pike had them moving where he wanted, not by knowing Rook's past like some ghost, but by making the lower world behave the way frightened operators always hated. Close. Hot. Loud. Too many angles. Too few breaths. Bram's silence after the next command told Rook the trust cost had landed without needing a lecture. They made the lower access bend with the wounded still moving and nobody clean. Rook's exposed position felt like a light on his chest. The damaged rifle sat wrong, his shoulder burned, and his ribs cut every breath short enough to count. Ahead, the engine space mouth opened in a wash of deeper noise and amber heat. Not open. Offered bet. He could hear the pattern now, under the roar, pressure behind. Blocker ahead. Crew noise bent off to the side, where it would pull a decent man the wrong way. Oren Pike's crew had used the pattern until it became habit. Habits won fights until someone saw them overreach. A figure shifted near the engine space threshold, broad and patient in the haze. Holding the lower route like a man who believed the team had no other shape left. Draven, likely. Maybe Cray again. It did not matter yet. The point was the overcommitment. Rook felt it click through the heat, and the bad timing dangerous and thin. Tamsin kept the wounded moving past his shoulder. Bram's element answered from the other side with boots on steel. The final space waited below the noise. Rook took the next step before fear could own the first one, and watched Oren Pike's pattern lean too far into the engine room. The engine space mouth hit Rook with noise before he crossed it. Not sound. Weight. It came out of the amber heat and flattened every command into pieces, turning Bram's voice on the far side into a hard shape without edges. The air tasted of oil and old sweat cooked too long against steel. Rook stepped in anyway, damaged rifle dragging, ribs cut short, shoulder burning under the sling. Clean distance looked childish in here. Pipes broke lines before they formed. Railings trapped hips. Grating shook under boots and made every step feel borrowed from the engine. Heat put water in his eyes and made every figure seem to move through dirty glass. Ahead, the broad shape at the threshold waited, patient and planted. Draven Ket, close enough to matter. Beyond him, another movement, sharper, familiar in the way pressure had been familiar all night. Cray, somewhere in the roar. And at the back of it, not seen cleanly. Oren Pike's pattern kept feeding men into the same lower deck answer. Pressure behind, blocker ahead, crew noise, bent sideways to punish decent hesitation. Then Oren appeared for 1 second through rail shadow, not giving a speech, not smiling. Just making a flat hand signal that sent Draven forward and pulled Cray half a pace wider. Human. Present. Still working. Rook stopped trying to pull the world back into rifle length. That had been the lie he kept reaching for, and the engine room had no mercy for it. He let the damaged weapon hang where it wanted to hang and listened under the roar. Not for words, for timing. Pressure behind them came in 2 beats. Bram's element answered on the 3rd pokes, boots on steel from the far side, late but closing. Tamsin shoved the wounded operator into a pocket of wall shadow and kept a hand on his gear. Using motion like a wedge instead of a cure. Mara was behind the line, not solving anything. But her last point on the service rail had put them facing the right mouth of the room. Orientation, not rescue. Rook saw the overcommitment then. Oren had run the same shape too long, because it had worked too well. Draven held the front, as if Rook had no choice but to break. Cray pressed from the wrong angle, as if fear would make Rook protect the center. Holt's rear pressure pushed the team toward that exact center. Sable's crew noise tugged at the wounded, trying to turn them into drag. It was elegant work, which made Rook want to break it with something ugly. The first rhythm failed. Bram's element hit a beat too far away, swallowed by a blast of engine noise that made timing look stupid. Cray used the miss and drove across the angle, patient no more. Shoulder low, close enough to turn the space into meat and steel. Draven stepped forward at the same time and took the front from Rook. Like a door being shut by a man instead of a hinge. Tamsin hauled the wounded operator back by gear and hip, saving him from being pulled into the middle, and the motion yanked her off balance for a breath. Rook saw all of it in pieces, Bram trapped behind a railing, Tamsin 1 bad step from the grating. Oren's hand lifting again through oil haze, the pressure shape tightening exactly where it had tightened all night. It had worked because everyone kept answering it from the outside. Rook had tried distance, restraint, route, angle, delay, crown. All of them had become costs. So he went forward. Voluntarily. It felt stupid in the honest, useful way of choices made after all the pretty ones had died. Draven moved to meet him, and Rook let the first contact steal what little air his ribs had saved. Hot steel struck his back. The rifle banged against grating, dead weight for half a breath, then useful only because it was in the way. Rook used that, used the drag, used his bad shoulder's smaller range instead of pretending it would open. No clean move. No clean anything. He entered the space under Draven's arms and made the blocker turn with him. Not far, just enough. Now he's following his own pattern, Rook said, but the engine tore most of it away. Tamsin heard enough. Bram heard the timing, or trusted it. His element hit from the far side on the next engine beat, not early, not late. Tamsin drove the wounded clear of the pull. Mara shouted 1 plain word about the rail, and Rook took it as direction, nothing more. Cray stepped in to close the gap and found Bram there instead, hard and moving. Draven lost the front he thought he owned. Oren's pressure folded inward, men crowding the space they had built to trap someone else. For the first time all night, Pike's pattern was eating its own room. It ended in pieces, not victory. Draven went down against the grating and stayed there. Under the weight of two operators who had no breath to celebrate, Cray hit the rail, came back once. Then Bram drove him into the wall hard enough to take the fight out of his legs without making it pretty. Rook found Oren in the collapsing shape of the room, close, human, capable, still trying to make the pattern answer. Pike's eyes went to the wounded first, then to Tamsin, then to the broken rifle riding wrong across Rook's chest. Still choosing, but still dangerous. Rook had no shot worth trusting and no distance worth wanting. He took the close range because it was the only honest range left. The impact drove pain through his shoulder and turned his ribs to wire. Oren fought him there, not like a legend. Like a trained man who understood leverage, panic, and the value of one more second. Tamsin's hand caught Rook's gear before he overbalanced. Bram's command cut through the roar in fragments. And the team closed the last pressure pocket by bodies, timing, and cost. Oren went down alive, pinned under steel light, and 3 exhausted men. His control, finally smaller than the room he had chosen. The engine kept roaring as if nothing had happened. The wounded were still wounded. The crew were still shaking. Rook stood over the heat with his breath broken and his fear out where everyone had already seen it. Threat neutralized. Not clean. Not close. Enough. Dawn made the dock look too ordinary. Wet concrete shone under emergency lamps that had not learned the fight was over. Diesel lay heavy in the air, mixed with salt and old rope and the sour breath of men who had come out of heat. Into open morning and still could not fill their lungs right. Rook stepped off the gangway with one hand on the rail and the damaged rifle hanging uselessly across his chest. Nobody cheered. That helped. Cheering would have felt like another kind of noise to survive. Behind him, Tamsin guided the wounded operator toward a line of blankets without making a performance out of it. Bram Keene was farther down the dock, giving short answers to people who wanted clean facts from a dirty night. Mara Thorne stood near the gangway, soot-streaked and furious, counting crew as they came off like the numbers might bite her if they were wrong. The ship rose behind them under hard dawn light. No longer a battlefield from the outside, just steel, paint, stacked containers, and smoke-colored exhaust. That was the worst trick of it. From the dock, it could almost pass for normal 5. Rook moved away from the gangway only far enough to stop blocking it. His shoulder had settled into a deep burn, and his ribs had become small accountants, charging him for each breath. Crew sat on wet concrete under orange lamps, wrapped in blankets, holding cups, staring at shoes, ropes, nothing. A man laughed once, too high, and stopped as if someone had put a hand over his mouth. Rook watched the engine room crewman from the lower passage get helped down by 2 others. The man still clutched the metal tag. Alive, not restored. There was a difference, and it stood there under the lamps with shaking hands. Tamsin crossed Rook's line of sight and paused just long enough to read his feet again. He was still standing, barely counted. She gave him a look that meant, "Stay if you are staying," then went back to the wounded. No comfort. No ceremony. Good. Rook had no use for ceremony. It made men say large things when small, honest ones were already hard enough. Bram glanced over once. Trust had not gone back to where it had been. Maybe it would. Maybe it would not. The dock did not care. The dock worker found him near a coil of black line and a puddle reflecting a red lamp. He was plain in the way tired working men were plain. Heavy jacket, salt on the cuffs, hands that looked as if they knew knots better than handshakes. "Halden?" he asked. Rook nodded. The man looked past him at the gangway. "Tobin Greer, my brother was in the engine room." Rook glanced toward the man with the tag before he could stop himself. Tobin saw the look and took it without flinching. "He's breathing," Tobin said. "Not thank you." Not praise. Just the fact he had checked first and would check again. His name was stitched crookedly on his jacket, half hidden under grime from the dock. A man dragged out of ordinary work and into the edge of a war he had not volunteered for. Rook liked him immediately, which made the next part worse. "He's off the ship," Rook said. It was true, and too small. Tobin watched survivors move across the dock in the gray light. Some walked like they had borrowed their legs. Some let others steer them. Emergency lamps painted everyone the same tired color. "If they go back aboard," Tobin said, "are they safe or just alive?" The question had no drama in it. That was why it cut Tay. Rook could have given him something official sounding, Shurian. He had heard enough official language in his life to fake a decent shape. He did not. Rook looked back at the cargo ship. Open air moved around him, cold against sweat that would not dry. Somewhere inside that hull, engine noise was still in the steel, waiting for men who would have to clean, repair, count, testify, sleep badly, come back, or refuse to. Oren Pike was under guard. His crew were down or bound or hurting. The pattern was broken. The ship had been taken back. If anyone wanted to use a phrase that tidy on a dock full of people who knew better, Rook flexed his bad hand once and felt dried oil crack along his knuckles. "I don't know yet," he said. Tobin nodded as if that answer had cost enough to be worth hearing. Rook expected him to walk away. He did not. He stood beside him, both of them facing the ship, while dawn lifted behind cranes and wet cables. Tamsin stopped a few yards off, saw Rook had not disappeared into some useful shadow, and kept walking. Rook stayed. Tobin's brother came down the gangway in a blanket, slow but on his feet. And Tobin moved one step forward, then waited until the man saw him. Rook put a steadying hand on the coil of dock line, not on anybody's shoulder, and stayed there with the open air, the diesel, the question